Welcome to the Tenet Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson, here with my friend and partner, Wes Brown.
Hey, everybody. Always waiting for more from Wes. With bated breath, I join you.
That's what I love about you, man. Anyway, so if this is your first time tuning in, we appreciate you giving us a listen. And if you've been listening for a while, Wes and I appreciate your continued support. Each week, we bring to you an interview with an artist or something art-related with the mission of supporting the visual arts. If you enjoy what you hear, we encourage you to take a moment and subscribe, rate, or review us on your favorite podcast platform. And with this or that, we once again have a wonderful guest for you. We have the honor of having Louise Martorano on the podcast. Louise is the executive director of RedLine. RedLine is a nonprofit contemporary art center and artist residency that fosters education and engagement between artists and communities to create positive social change. Louise, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to talk with us. I really appreciate it.
So I have to interject right away here. I'm super excited about this. I also have a nonprofit. It does civic education programs. So hearing about your nonprofit and what all the great things you're doing, I'm just super excited. So back in my element finally. I love it.
Yay. Yeah. We weave in a lot of specifically arts education into RedLine's programming and how we show up through artists in communities. So yeah, Wes, I do hope that you'll like what you hear. Yeah, but now I'm very curious about hearing about your nonprofit.
We'll get to that. We'll get to the nonprofit stuff.
Turn this around real quickly.
You bet. That's all good, man. We've had the tables turned before, so this will be fun. Yeah,
absolutely.
So anyway, go ahead, Todd.
So Louise, you're a Denver native, is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I was born at Rose Hospital, which I feel like Denver natives frequently call out the hospital they were born at. I don't know why, but that does seem to be a habit of us. But I'm not crazy. Like I don't plaster bumper stickers about being Colorado born like all over the place. But yes, I born in Colorado.
And you very much have an arts background. I was looking at some of your education, but did you grow up in an artistic family?
No, my parents were both pediatricians. And I think all it took was one evening talking about medical procedures at the dinner table to make me never, ever want to commit to a life of medicine. That's all it took. Yeah, I went running from that. And I really how I was turned on to contemporary arts and humanities, I have to credit actually two high school teachers I had in Douglas County High School. And it was a humanities class where you walked into the classroom and they had set up the room not as you would typically see, kind of not the militant rows and chairs all facing forward, but instead it was couches with, poetry written on the wall and posters of Monet and Van Gogh. And we read Milton's Paradise Lost, and, the gates of Dante's Inferno were the entrance to the classroom. And so it was just kind of a classroom turned on its head, which I realized was kind of what I want to do with contemporary arts practice as I grew older. So yeah, I have to give credit to Mr. King and Dr. Riddell. And it was a team taught class also, which I thought was very informative to kind of a horizontal leadership style that I always appreciated.
So from there, talk about where you went to, where you got educated as far as your college is concerned.
Yeah, I always say I'm hopelessly local in some ways because my undergraduate was at the University of Colorado Boulder, and because I wanted to work full time while going to school, I always, was able to find that in the state and university school system. So yeah, I managed record stores during my undergraduate degree while doing recording arts and contemporary art history. It was really music technologies and art histories. And then my graduate degree was at UCD. And that's when I was working at the Museum of Contemporary Art during the day and then working record stores at night. And yeah, I received my Master's of Arts at UCD. And then, yeah, it was shortly after finishing my degree there and working at the museum for about, I want to say it was 2 years after I finished my degree program that I found RedLine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. How did that transpire? How did you end up becoming and taking over as executive director? Because RedLine started in like 2008, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when I was at the Museum of Contemporary Art, I was recruited by an individual named John Grant, who used to run the public art program in the city of Denver. He was then recruited to oversee the Adjay building capital project. And so he was overseeing kind of all the construction and contractor management, as well as the exhibitions program at the Museum of Contemporary Art. And so he hired me to do all the kind of guest experiences. I was kind of like a general manager at the museum. And when he left before I did, when we were at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and then shortly after when I left, I was working a lot of different odd jobs while finishing my master's degree. And he called me and said that I really needed to, look into this place called RedLine. And so I remember doing one phone interview with PJ D'Amico, who was the first executive director that was engaged in 2010. Prior to that, there was an interim director. But long story short, after about 3 interviews of a lot of people, I got the job. And at that point, I was hired as an office manager. And I walked into RedLine and I'm like, well, that's great, but there's no office at RedLine. There's artist studios, there's exhibition space, and there's no office as far as the eye can see. So I really started working towards supporting kind of just helping to build the organization and its arts programming from kind of day one. And because it was a small and mighty organization, I mean, we had a $400,000 operating budget, or maybe it was like $350 when I was hired. But, when you're a team of 3, you go through succession very quickly. So within really 6 months, I was the operations director. And then within the second year, I was the deputy director. And then in my third year was when the former executive director left and I threw my hat in the ring to be the executive director. So I became the ED in 2013.
Very
Right
good.
on. So you helped really kind of shape the vision of what RedLine is today.
I mean, what I have always loved about RedLine's evolution is that it really has been driven through the voices of artists. And I think I came along at the time where I was really best as a steward to those voices and recognizing that there was not a lot of infrastructure around an artist's career and that was a lack. And here, the residency program provided, tangible infrastructure as far as free studio space, which, in some ways gave better legitimacy to a practice, in that it allocated real estate, but there is much more than just space that artists need. And so I think I came in as a good steward to voices, not necessarily as someone who came in that just had a grand vision of what needed to happen. What I felt was missing in the contemporary arts kind of paradigm is that I never was connected to the artists as people. I was only connected to the objects that were on the other side of artists at the museum. And I really felt like it was actually in the nurturing and the cultivation of the person that would truly help build community. And so I never liked kind of the the elitist rap that contemporary art would receive. I didn't like in some ways it's uh, removed loftiness that sometimes you would experience. I really saw that artists as people were this great conduit to our soul, and that if we could create a stronger connection between artists as people, then people could connect with people, which would then support contemporary arts practice and growth in a community. So that was kind of my formula. And it was definitely just totally ridden with bias because I was so enthusiastic about the artwork that was coming out of the artist studios. And of course, what's unique about RedLine, it's an open studio format. So that kind of confluence of visitors to artists and their practice is part of the culture and understanding of the space. And so artists who are uncomfortable with that typically don't apply, but we have seen it only be advantageous when it comes to building that relationship that's so important.
Wow.
So,
that was an answer.
That was great.
No, that was
great.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So the one thing I'm like I said before, I came from a nonprofit background. I was curious about, how did RedLine start? Like, was there a benefactor that left some money?
Yeah, no. And I should, of course, I wanted to share that when you said it was founded in 2008. So yes, Laura Mirage is an artist and philanthropist, and she and her husband, David Mirage, have the Mirage Foundations, and they purchased RedLine's current building in 2008, and they donated that building to the nonprofit. And so at the very beginning, Laura really had a vision that basically art, community, and education were these inseparable pillars. And that she talks about kind of going around the neighborhood and seeing if a contemporary art center is something that that the Five Points in Curtis Park neighborhood would want or enjoy or need. And there was good feedback, and that drove her to continue to build this program. And as an artist herself, she understood very clearly the necessity of an artist studio for a maker and someone who was making a career out of their creative practice, and how practices can grow at the scale of their space in some respects, but that it's necessary to have that support. So she was really focused on emerging artists, and also how affordable studio space is hard to come by. It was hard to come by, 12 years ago, and it is even harder to come by now.
Absolutely. Talk to us about, you talked about the history, but talk to us about what all is offered through RedLines. You have exhibits, you have artist residency programs. Talk about all the different things that RedLine helps to facilitate.
Yeah, and I realize that on a podcast, nodding your head doesn't always translate. So, but yes, that is. We do have a lot of things, again, that have all kind of come from a place of filling an important gap in the community. So affordable studio space, which was our original purpose, was necessary. How exhibitions are, in some ways the outcome of an artist studio practice. And so kind of having those components of an artist practice, but then also based on kind of our location in the neighborhood, we really built programs that responded to our immediate community. And so one of our first core programs was the Reach Studio program, which was actually designed initially by two volunteers of RedLine that used to go next door to St. Francis Center, which is a day shelter that we share the alley with, and trying to create a community studio and program that supported artists who were experiencing homelessness or financial hardship to have a supportive, safe space to create work and grow their practice. I always talk about the Reach Studio programming as, it's really this amazing heartbeat of RedLine, because unlike other programs, it has continued to have a sustaining membership in terms of the artists that connected with us 12 years ago through that program continue to walk through the doors today. And then we also have seen that program grow up until this point. And one of the first participants of the program now leads the program, and his name is Gonzo. He's often called the mayor of 5 Points, and he's brilliant. He should be on this podcast, not me. But he's a wonderful painter and a wonderful person that, he has an amazing story of, being incarcerated and living on the street. And then really, I've just seen through his creative practice, him grow to completely sustaining himself off of the sales and exhibitions that he has received through the Reach Studio program. The through line of all of RedLine's programming is really supporting artists and how that in turn builds a strong community. And so with the Reach Studio program, it's of course working with artists from all different ages, but creating this safe space where we provide materials, professional development, exhibition opportunities, and that, is a weekly program at RedLine. But then also how the Artist in Residence program, which is a 2-year program where artists are provided free studio space, and then they also get exhibitions and studio visits and kind of all the sort of exposure and network connections, as well as opportunities to volunteer in the community and create projects in response to community needs or desires in terms of collaboration. We also have programs that support that kind of outcome or desire, where artists will kind of go into schools. We've worked with 25 Denver public schools to provide arts education between artists in a classroom and an art teacher, as well as one-on-one mentorship after school for a smaller cohort of students. And that's our Epic Arts and our Art Core mentoring program. I have to say that the amount that we do is oftentimes at the same quantity of the artists that we're connected with, because it's really this idea of trying to create support for artist ideas. So but our core programs certainly are Artist in Residency, the Epic Arts program, which is, supporting arts education in schools and supporting teachers, Art Core Mentoring, which is that one-on-one mentoring program for youth who are oftentimes also experiencing homelessness or have hardships in the home, but show this really creative talent and kind of find their voice through the arts versus maybe not having it cultivated in other ways. So oftentimes teachers or principals will elect them to be part of this program. And they'll get a mentor from the residency program for a year. And then our other kind of major program that we hold on an annual basis is our 48 Hours of Socially Engaged Art Summit. And that's a 2-day summit that really looks to, in some ways, do a state of the union of the creative nonprofits in Colorado, as well as outside of Colorado, because a lot of times the work of nonprofits, you're working so hard to be in collaboration with your communities that you don't get the opportunity to know also the other nonprofits in that ecosystem. And so it's a little bit of an industry share as well as an artist share that goes on through that program, and kind of what projects folks are working on.
Wow, it's fantastic. So in addition to that, you also have at the RedLine, you have programs developed for adults. You have adult programming, you have youth programming. Talk a little bit about some of those things that you guys do, because it sounds like you're offering something all the time. Well, probably not right at the moment, but when things are normal, whatever that is, there's a lot of programming going on in RedLine proper.
I guess maybe this is a good opportunity for me to share that one of the new kind of areas that RedLine has really kind of scaled over the past few years is our regranting programs. And what that is RedLine partnering with a foundation to provide project support for different artists' ideas in our community. So right now we're running, I guess it's 5 regranting programs, and I would say that that all fits in the category of adult programs in some ways, because what it does is provide financial resources for artist projects across the state of Colorado. Um, one major one, which is called Arts and Society, looks at, in some ways, the premise of that program is that arts can impact social change, which is very much why RedLine is an administrator to it. And I think we were chosen to be so. But it is a unique funding collaboration that really focuses on how artists are showing up in all these different cross-sector ways that deal with health and homelessness and the environment, and that for as many artists there is many intersections into kind of areas of social change and positive social change in that way. And that's certainly somewhat of the DNA of citizen artists that come into RedLine, because they're definitely looking at how they can translate their creative practice towards community good. And sometimes that just is how they are as people, but it also oftentimes is in kind of the projects that they're interested in creating, but just need some support to do so. This program is also open to other arts nonprofits that can apply for these grants to do. And so anyway, that's one example of kind of how, especially during this time where we can't gather at RedLine for adult programs and youth programs, that it's still helping project support outside of the building happen. But we do have, again, prior to COVID-19, we certainly had like figure drawing workshops that were non-instructed and artist-led. We had Makeshift Mondays, which really try to celebrate the creativity coming out of our volunteer and resident artist pool for a community. In some ways like I guess the only way I can talk about Makeshift Mondays is giving an example. Like one Makeshift Monday was like creating your own board game. Like, so it's a little bit of just kind of fun, come in and learn something new on the first Monday of the month. I think it's actually the second Monday of the month, which sadly at the moment is not available. But I do think, in this moment, because RedLine has been very positioned to be community responsive based on the artist needs in the residency, as well as in our immediate community and our community's needs, we were quickly able to kind of turn ourselves inside out. We were already out quite a bit anyway, but just kind of even leaning more so on how we can be this kind of pass through, but that's trusted, that artists can go to help gain support for their ideas, or even just as people. We're doing a lot of relief funds right now for obviously both the economic crisis that is unfortunately paired with the public health crisis right now.
So did you get outside funding separate from like maybe some governmental funding to help support those outreach kind of things?
Absolutely. It's in some ways, and I would recommend this to all nonprofits, especially right now, where, you can, okay, let me, I care so much about this issue, Wes, so I'm going to try to be very succinct.
Sure, not a problem. And I'll tighten it up, so don't feel bad if you need to pause. So,
well, so, again, just taking Arts and Society as an example, it involves a private foundation, a state arts agency, a major health foundation, the Colorado Health Foundation, a national foundation, the Humera Foundation, and SCFD, the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, which is based on, a penny of every dollar goes to the arts. So through that partnership that in some ways tracks the elevation of the arts sectors, the different elevations of the arts sector, you are able to pool and create major capacity grants statewide. Because when foundations and state agencies and cities and national foundations partner, suddenly allocations can be broadened. So priorities and bylaws that mandate funding can create a larger pool of impact. because though their funds can still be allocated as needed, it can reach a broader, grantee pool because it doesn't have to specifically outreach through those specific priorities. And so, basically what was a $200,000 program is now $1 million of granting that can go statewide versus just within like the 7-county SCFD district. And so, and RedLine was chosen to administer this because I think, again, the focus we have that the relationship between art and social change. But what I also just truly love about the program is that when funders are able to get together and pool money, they can have a enormous impact. And it's not so much of this siloed approach to arts funding. It's a collaborative approach that has a major impact across the state. And that's really how the relief efforts have gone right now. RedLine is administering the Colorado Artist Relief Fund, and we're administrator to the Colorado Music Relief Fund. And we are not, in some ways, we're not at the front end of that. We're more in the back end of that. But because you have a nonprofit as the administrator, I am someone that can meet an artist at 10 o'clock at night and hand them their check, where that's not really possible based on kind of a city agency structure or a private foundation. Like that sort of accessibility and that peer-to-peer sort of, artery, I guess, is just not typical. So I feel like, again, when you're trying to level the field and make a more horizontal and equitable approach to philanthropy, partnering with a nonprofit certainly helps bring it down to a ground level and a grassroots level that is more accessible to the people that you're trying to support.
So that
was still very long.
No, that's great. Very succinct. So kudos. But is this whole partnership kind of thing, is this a new development, or has Denver always kind of embraced the whole partnership of nonprofits and government sectors and stuff? Because I can say from my experience in South Dakota and working with civic education or children's youth programs, it's not that case. Everybody looks as like this, there's only so many pieces of pie and I don't want to share my pie with anybody. What's your take on that?
I really feel lucky to be in Colorado because I do think, though we have grown in population and in a lot of different industries, we are really collaborative. We're a collaborative community, and we kind of recognize quickly the strengths in each other and that we're better together in a lot of ways. And, the contemporary arts paradigm is certainly one that would be like, my ideas only and everybody else to hell with you. But that is not really how Colorado has been. And I really think that people look at how they can complement each other's mission to kind of achieve a greater impact. And I think that is also been encouraged in how philanthropy has operated in the community as well. I think philanthropy, certainly locally, wants to see how nonprofits are connecting with each other and how we're helping each other through, ways that we can based on our expertise. So yeah, thankfully, I can count on one hand the amount of kind of more competitive organizations versus the collaborative, which I think RedLine more falls on. So yeah, I think it's a spirit across Colorado that we see that.
That's fantastic. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it certainly has helped with certainly relief efforts too right now with COVID-19, because if you have artists going to 500 different application portals to get relief funds and having to spend like their precious time while in crisis seeking out all those different relief funds and all those different eligibility criteria, it's exhausting. So, these type of partnerships help to inform efficiency in crisis and response that is it's more humane.
Yeah. So I'm going to follow up with that if I can. So when you guys first got hit with the COVID, did you already have kind of an idea in place how you're going to proceed, or did you have to kind of take a step back and take a lay of the land and say, how are we going to do this? What was the thought process for that?
The first thing I did was try to immediately understand how this was hitting the artist community. So we made the decision to close our doors on March 13th. And it was that Sunday that I was sending a survey out to artists, asking them to project out what they thought their loss of income was going to be in the next 30 to 60 days. That became instrumental in my providing data back to the cultural sector to help inform relief efforts. And so I think, again, because of the really close connection that we had with the artist community, that was our first move. I think being a community responsive organization, again, you're kind of poised in that moment to respond anyway. It was probably 2 weeks after that I was sitting down and I was kind of walking my board through a 120-day financial contingency plan. Now, one of the things that I did is, as you know, with a nonprofit, there's a certain mentality that you already are in, and you're kind of in survival mode as a nonprofit. You're always watching the bank account go down. You're always kind of trying to, kind of get to the cash flow of the organization and the programs. And so you're already kind of in that survival space. So one of the things that I just, as kind of seeing this organization go through times of financial stress over the past 10 years and getting out of it, I didn't want to be too reactive. And I'm just like, look, we're going to check in week by week, and we're going to just take it step by step and be responsive and apply for relief as also provide relief and be measured and intentional, which I think actually served us very well. We did not furlough any of our staff. We kept everybody on. And I think that was because there was a measured intentionality to our philosophy during it,
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness, huh?
No, it is. Yeah.
I knew it was going to be okay, but that was our approach. And I think that, it ended up being okay. And, we don't know what things are going to look like, but I do think that, being measured and thoughtful at this time is very important versus being reactive and pulling the rug out from underneath the organization when it has a history of knowing how to deal with unsteady legs.
Yeah. Well, I think anytime you can act with intention, I think you're far better ahead. So, kudos for you and your organization, and specifically your board, that they were able to think that way, because it's so easy to get reactionary. So yeah, good job.
Totally.
Good job.
Well, I will tell the board you said
so.
They will appreciate hearing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I give it to them that they trusted me.
Yeah.
I think that is it's always a unique aspect of a board when they'll kind of stand behind leadership and stand behind staff and say, we're going to go with you on this. So
yeah, and I've seen it personally how it works a different way, where the board, one roughshod the rest of them into basically folding. So
not okay.
Yeah. So kudos to your board.
Yeah, trust is necessary for sure.
Todd, do you want to sneak in here? Sorry about the nonprofit, all the nonprofit speak.
No, it's fine. I'm learning. I'm being educated, so it's good. I'm happy.
No, it's good.
If you're an artist in need, what is the process in order to try to secure some relief? What do you need to do?
Yeah, depending upon your location, it of course will play an important role. But RedLine's effort, well, there's a few going on concurrently that have different aspects. But the Colorado Artist Relief Fund is a application that can be accessed through Colorado Creative Industries, Denver Arts and Venues, RedLine, and also is in partnership with the Warhol Foundation. That's how we were able to add in more support for it. And it's just an application that is available on Submittable called the Colorado Artist Relief Fund. And it's a very short application intentionally. And it, you essentially just have to say, the level of financial stress you're in and what that means. And as a career artists or practicing artists know, it doesn't. Artists were reporting initially about $3,600 a month of lost income, and that was scaling up to as much as $30,000 based on kind of lost commissions. So that is one place. If you're a musician, there's the Colorado Music Relief Fund. The Colorado Artist Relief Fund was supporting all creatives and still is, but the Colorado Music Relief Fund, which was driven by 7S Management, it had a major concert in collaboration with Breckenridge Brewery and KBCO, and they raised $600,000 to grant to musicians as well as kind of the ecosystem around musicians, the lighting guy, the recording person, the managers of the band. So that is also available through comusicrelief.org, but that also can get you to the submittable page for the Colorado Music Relief Fund. So yeah, then the other project we had really start immediately is I was noticing that a lot of artists were creating, PPE gear, and they were sewing masks. And so I did some fundraising and asked for foundations to help me employ artists to make masks that then could be donated to the Denver area shelters, because through our Reach Studio program, we were hearing through our partners that these were going to become just explosions of coronavirus. And so we really need to get PPE gear to as many people who access the shelter system as well as the frontline workers in those systems. But we also wanted to provide weekly financial support for artists. So that ended up providing about a $300 to $500 weekly salary to artists over a 8-week period, while they would drop off PPE masks, and we would then donate them to 5 area shelters. So that was another those are the projects that I'm still kind of looking for today, how you solve both the economic and the public health crisis in one to allow for kind of the greatest impact.
Wow, it's fantastic. Via RedLine, you offer a lot of resources for artists. And if you're new to Denver, you might not realize that. So can you talk a little bit about what all you offer as far as resources? And I know that you have a page that's dedicated to grants and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely, if I were an artist first arriving in Denver, one of the things that I can always share about the residency program, not only if you apply and are awarded a studio, it's, free studio space for 2 years. But then what artists have shared with me as a result of that is that you do the networking of 5 years in a 2-year period, which really means a lot for an artist's career, especially in a town like Denver, because who does help. And who you're connected to helps enormously. And it can bring a lot of income opportunity through your door. So the artist grants too, in addition to the residency, we have, again, a whole slew of now opportunities. The Arts and Mitigation Fund just came out, which is, I want to say it's up to $30,000 of an emergency preparedness sort of project that an artist could either do on their own or collaborate with. Arts and Society, that application just closed. There's also the Insight Fund, which is for small project support. But, I do have to say, like, at the end of the day, though, the financial support and the economic support that comes by having to not pay for a studio at RedLine, I think the most valuable resource that RedLine provides is that human connection, that network to other people in the Colorado arts ecosystem. Because I can't tell you the amount of artists that have said that just by having their studio door open at RedLine, opportunity came through the door. And so I think that is probably, at the end of the day, one of the most important things for artists to keep in mind when they land in Denver. I think RedLine allows for a soft landing, where if you were to land in, say, New York or LA, that maybe that sort of, in some ways, immediate connection is not as available. But I always talk about RedLine's residency as kind of being the back of office for the artists. We're kind of like the management team behind all the residents, and making sure that, people come in and do studio visits with them. They get interested in their work. We've been doing these Zoom calls with artists for folks that we were supposed to attend our gala to help build the relationship. So, yeah.
So how does one go about applying to be a artist in residence at RedLine?
So sadly, the application closed on May 1st. Achoo. If I had gotten this scheduled with you earlier, Todd, which I apologize for, it's not that you didn't try. But typically our application posts in the spring, in like March, and then is due in May. And so artists will move in after going through a 3-tiered application cycle. First, there's an art jury, where it's a blind jury that doesn't know the artist's name, is really just reviewing the work and the artist statement. If the applications are advanced to the community jury is a new set of folks. And again, the jury changes every year and is comprised of different people in the community each year that have some relationship with RedLine and our mission. The community jury looks at the artist's interest in, again, building a better community, kind of their volunteer work, their comfort level of having an open studio, their current interests in, as far as how they see what they'll do in their RedLine residency and how that'll be connected to a larger community context. And then the final round is artists being invited to interview for the space. So though the application itself isn't that arduous, it's a long time to go through all 3 steps, in that it takes a long time. And then artists will typically move in Labor Day. So in September. This year, though, because I felt that the current resident artists were not getting the full experience of their residency, I've extended out their residency. So new artists will be moving in later, so that we can have some sense of a true residency experience for those who are awarded it, but then kind of in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis.
But here's the good news, Louise.
Yes.
This gives these artists right now 9 months to prepare, to get their portfolio together, to get their mind together
right,
for
Wes.
2021. So if you're out there and you want a residence program,
That's right. Yeah.
you got some time, get hot on it and be prepared.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that it's an important thing to do because, with these types of application processes, the first time jurors are oftentimes experiencing the work is mitigated through the screen. So you have to have good images and you have to have works that read well digitally now more than ever, because that physical exposure to bodies of work is not oftentimes what is possible. So yes, though I have to say that the largest amount of applications come in the day before or the day of,
As always,
or right at midnight.
Procrastination
I'm
at its
the same with grant reports, so I can't judge.
I can relate to that.
So what do you see the biggest mistake that artists make when they're trying to apply for residency? Can you give us any tips outside of what you just mentioned?
I think one of the most challenging things is that oftentimes an artist statement isn't articulated in relationship to the work that's submitted. And so there's a disconnect between the object and the ideas. And so I would say if artists can really look at how they're giving an entree into the work through the application process, that will be great. But when the two don't relate, it really is hard for jurors because that's all they get. They're not talking to the artist yet. So
Sure. So how many?
and then
go
bad
ahead.
images is bad too. Yeah, not great images is a problem. So
So how many artists do you have that are in residence right now?
right now we have what is it, 16 artists in residence.
Wow.
So some you can share studio space or you can have solo studio space when you apply. Sometimes there's no stipulation that says you have to share, but oftentimes artists are entering residencies because they've already been in a very isolated practice, like in their kitchen or basement or garage. And so that desire to kind of create connection is evident and there. And sometimes an artist practice really doesn't play well with other medias. Like, I couldn't put a ceramic artist with like a printmaker or a photographer because of the dust and etc. So sometimes an artist practice really demands that they have a solo space. But when it doesn't, we've had some amazing studio pairings go on where those artists become like lifelong friends. So
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
So when you bring in a new group, is it staggered at all, or is it just one whole new group of people that come in for the next round?
It's staggered. So we usually have first years and second years. So we always open up the call every year because we're always open. We're seeing second years transition out and first years transition in, and then first years become second years. And that has a little bit of a baked in mentorship, philosophy to it, so that, second year artists can help first year artists get acclimated. And then on top of that, we also have an invitation residency at RedLine called the Resource Artist Program, which is typically given to more established artists. And there's 3, sometimes as many as 5 spots for resource artists. Right now it's Chuck Parson, Tony Ortega, and Carly Warren. And these are artists who've been in the community for a long time and in some ways offer their experience to the residents. And at the same time, because RedLine wasn't around when they were kind of coming up and during their like emerging period, it also offers a community back to them. So I see healthy reciprocity that happens between the resident and the resource artist program.
And then talk a little bit more about what is required of these artists that are in residence. I know that, it's just, you do have some requirements and some expectations.
Sure. Yeah. I have to say I'm just, I'm not really an enforcer, Todd. So, I really like to meet artists where they are and where they need to be. And because I have found that really makes the most sense in supporting artists' careers. Now, is it crushing to me when an artist studio doesn't go used because of how valuable it is in an artist's life? So we do have an expectation that when you decide to apply and accept a residency, that you will truly utilize that space because studio space is not affordable and it really can be pivotal in the growth of an artist's career. We encourage artists to participate in at least one semester of the Epic Arts program because we've seen that kind of relationship between kind of K through 12 students and a social justice project really has a lot of benefit based on, just kind of what artists have shared with us in the past. there is an expectation to participate when possible in the mini studio visits that are offered and the industry talks, which are kind of monthly talks where we ask an industry professional to come in and talk to the artist about a particular area of an artist practice. Like, it may have to do with insurance or taxes or running an LLC, but just that, again, that kind of administrative support brought through speakers. So, I'm definitely not walking around the space with a writing crop, making sure that people are doing, I'm not checking boxes on creativity, but I think there's an understanding, and there's been a now decade-long mantra that artists leaving RedLine always say, and that the more you are at RedLine, the more you will get from RedLine. Because it is that being present in the space that not only allows for unexpected opportunity to walk through your door, but also that kind of amazing inspiration that can come with working in space with different creatives at the same time,
Well, I like the professional development aspect of it, because we did a lot of professional development at the nonprofit that I started working with, where we worked with other nonprofits talking about board development and strategic planning and all that kind of stuff. So I would imagine for artists, that professional development about how do I pay my taxes, sales tax, how is that implemented, and all that kind of how to start and run an LLC. All that stuff is great material for an artist.
Yeah, and it can be a daunting. Anyone who is, essentially independent contractor, works for themselves and is responsible to essentially running their own business as a single individual, it's a daunting task to do it all. And so, RedLine really has focused on trying to, again, build the scaffolding around that career. It's just like, so more people can choose to follow what they want to do in life versus feel like it's the not practical path,
Right.
And trying to model best practices when it comes to how organizations can support artists and what artists should expect from organizations versus getting taken advantage of, and etc. So.
Right.
That's great. And those are some of the things that the artists don't really think about, or people don't think about with the art career. Some of those professional things that we all need to address. If you're going to be successful, you need to have those tools. So kudos. Just so well thought out. I'm incredibly impressed by, what this organization offers and what they facilitate in the community. I want to go back to programming for just a little bit. Is all the programming for the most part free to the public that happens there at RedLine?
Yes, all of it is free. This is, again, a situation that I think positioned us in a place of strength when kind of public health crisis kind of descended upon all of us, because we were really focused on removing access in terms of not removing access, creating more access when it came to removing economic barriers. So we just didn't want anyone to have to decide between coming to RedLine and going to the grocery store or whatever. So we've always had all of our programs be free. And, so it is really, truly a free community art center, and everything we do is free because of the generosity of foundations and government agencies and our fundraising efforts as a public nonprofit. So yeah, everything is free there. When we do occasionally have ticketed events, it's usually based on the partnership that we may be doing, where they need to have some sort of earned income come alongside it. But yeah, most of our offerings are free.
That's phenomenal. Are there other art centers like this in other cities around the country? Is this kind of a unique thing for Denver?
There's definitely residencies all across the country. One of the things that makes RedLine unique is we are one of few that offer such a long residency. So typically you'll find like month-long residencies or 6 months are really where an artist, it's more project-based, and the engagement is based on producing an exhibition. So it's not on such a long trajectory, which really looks at like an artist kind of getting settled in their studio and making a body of work or bodies of work. So I think that's what makes RedLine unique. There are certainly other programs that are 2 and 3 years. It's just there's not a lot of us. And then, yeah, there, of course, there's community art centers all around the country. But I do think that, again, how we kind of live through our social justice mission and how we're very artist driven and we really focus on depth versus scale are all kind of aspects of our uniqueness. You know, we do a lot of things that support artists that I think other institutions don't do, you know, that I think have come to be really great for the artists. Like we'll do a trip every year where we invite artists to meet us in another city, and I build an itinerary that essentially connects them to that artist ecosystem. So I'll set them up with tours at museums or to see private collections or to go to studio visits with other artists. And so they'll have like this packed weekend that would typically only be available to like patrons on trips. But artists are now learning about residencies. So the idea is that if they were to suddenly, you know, have to take a position or have to leave the state because of a spouse or something, they would be landing and have already allies in those spaces, you know, and they would know the residencies and they'd have names and people, because we realize how important names and people are to developing an artist's career. So there's those type of things that I think make us unique. And we're really not bureaucratic. I just refuse to be bureaucratic. You know, people really can walk into RedLine and pitch an exhibition, and there's a likelihood that it'll happen. That's what the current show going on right now was, that an artist and his wife walked in last September and said, you know, I really would like to do a portrait show that celebrates the community. And I'm just like, well, I can't think of a better thing to do right now. And so right now RedLine has an exhibition called Faces in the Crowd, and it celebrates African-American leaders in our community, but those who are still living, because that was the premise, you know, and also of all ages and artists, and kind of, it is an amazing love letter to the community. And yeah, that wouldn't have happened without an artist walking in and saying like, I have this idea. And it just so happened to be on a Saturday, and I just so happened to be there, and we just so happened to get connected. And I did not make him, you know, pile over some sort of exhibition proposal with a budget and a lot of bureaucracy. You know, it was a great idea, and we wanted to support it because it was an amazing opportunity for an institution to say thank you, you know.
That's great. And you kind of answered the question, but one of my questions was going to be if you had like a sister organization or sister organizations in other cities where you could do kind of an artist exchange type of thing. But it sounds like you have this program set up where it kind of facilitates that. So,
I mean, we are part of a network called the National Performance Network, which is 90 organizations across the country that definitely seeks to have that end goal, which is like a circulatory system across the country that helps move artists into different parts of the country to bring opportunities. Now, that is mainly performance-based, but the idea of the network is so that can happen and those exchanges can happen. And so we are doing those exchanges. It is pivotal to an artist's career to be seen outside of their local context to help build opportunity on a global scale. So it's a super important point, Todd, that you're bringing up when it comes to an artist's trajectory in their career is how we can create opportunities outside the state of Colorado, as well as find ways for them to be supported within.
Going back to the situation we're currently in with the pandemic, I know that in the past week and in the coming weeks, I've been in contact with some museums and galleries around town, and I know that they're planning on opening up. Is there a plan for RedLine to open up in some kind of capacity here in the near future?
Yeah, you know, I kept telling my board that we really wanted to be kind of in the middle of the pack. Though we like to be in the front on some things, like we just are not anxious to help anyone get sick. That is not what we want to do. So We have 3 exhibits installed right now, and also a Bruce Price succulent sale out on the patio where he's done ceramics and succulents, and he was one of our first resource artists. Um, and so we're going to start doing appointments, to understand kind of how people are moving through space so that we can better keep the space clean as people are experiencing the space, and just understanding how they're moving throughout the space. And then we'll eventually open up to regular hours. So yeah, that's the plan.
Let's talk about the social justice work that is central to the RedLine.
Yeah, it has always, in some ways, been. It's been in our very founding because of the kind of inequities that follow an artist's career, but then also, of course, how that continues to grow in kind of the disparities you see in relationship to obviously racial injustice, and how that has been really an intentional part of RedLine's mission, and how that continues to just be it has always been part of who we are and continues to be more of who we are. But part of the reason why it's even more of who we are is we're allowed to say what it is now. Where I remember when first getting to RedLine, I wasn't allowed in grant applications to use the word social justice. And what we were always doing at RedLine is in some ways saying it and being intentional about it, but having in some ways to walk around the language because it just wasn't very acceptable. So, I think that, again, it always comes through finding ways to support artists based on who those individuals are and how they're showing up for their community, and how in doing so we are able to really lean into that mission because of how much artists are showing up for each other and their communities in times of crisis. In particular, and as of the uprisings recently with Black Lives Matter, it was immediate response that we partnered with Black Lives Matter 5280 and the Anti-Racist Club to do a pop-up exhibition and a protest poster making exhibit in RedLine's parking lot. So though we have not technically opened, we were kind of immediately providing outdoor space for protest posters to be created because it was a moral imperative, and especially in relationship to, RedLine sits within a historically African American and Jewish neighborhood, and one of the only places that African Americans were allowed to live because of the redlining practice, which is, of course, a challenge with our name and something that we've always had to kind of talk about very clearly, that, the RedLine as a name was really about this idea of inviting artists to kind of cross boundaries. And, of course, the practice of RedLine was all about boundaries and where people could or could not live. In our naming, it was this idea of knowing that you would find support by doing so and crossing that, experimental threshold, or a threshold where, you could follow any idea to its end and not be edited. So, now and always in our mission, we have found ways to take diversity, equity, and inclusion as necessary components to our programming, which is why we focus on historically marginalized communities in our education programming. It's why we look at, individuals who have less access to economic opportunities like studio space or art materials, like for folks experiencing homelessness. And so I do think that we're always constantly auditing where we can do better and support kind of the racial inequities that occur through systematic oppression in our mission, and how that can happen by even the internal work the organization does. The staff, the leadership staff has been through undoing racism training, and this is really just, it's part of a philosophy and a commitment that we have always had and always want to show up for communities that have dealt with systematic oppression. So, I think our social justice mission just continues to be more important and grow more and more each day. And also how that relates to just kind of equity around artist pay. And again, trying to bring a standard of care in an artist's career, just like how, most every profession has a starting salary, except for the artist has it's all over the place. So how can we outfit artists and our community with best practices when it comes to providing artist support and opportunities? And how that always goes through a racial justice lens.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you'd set up a space outside where people could produce protest posters. Is there other outreach that you've been doing as of late as well in conjunction with all that?
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to our education director, JC Futrell, who he's been a longtime part of the slam poet community in Denver. He and his sister, Ashara Ikundayo, used to run Slam Nuba, which is now a program of RedLine for slam poetry through their partnership. I only say it's a program of RedLine in that it's housed and we're happy to house it, but it's truly through their vision and we get to offer the space. But currently there's initiative to rename the Stapleton neighborhood Mosley, which is actually JC, our education director's grandfather's name.
Wow.
And he has a campaign running and a GoFundMe page. And so that's just another way where we're looking at a lot of different ways where both even the staff as individuals, but also artists in our neighborhood can look at how we can better celebrate Black leaders and African-American leaders in our community in the Five Points neighborhood, and how that can bring support to, monumental works made by artists of color. So I think we have our efforts in a lot of those areas right now. And some which have already come to fruition and some that are still in the works.
You said that you currently have 3 exhibits up, even though it's not open to the public right now. Can you talk a little bit about those exhibits that you currently have on display and when people are able to make appointments and to visit again, what they may see when they come to RedLine?
Yes. So our patio, of course, has, and we are, I will have it on my email, and there'll be 2 other staff members' emails where you can sign up for appointment for tours. But there is a Bruce Price, succulent and ceramic sale going on the patio. And then there is Faces in the Crowd, which is the artist Dwayne Glappian, who is an African-American artist who I spoke about, who wanted to write a love letter to his community. And so there's 100 portraits in the space right now that represent different community leaders. We just had Charlie Sampson actually visit his portrait at RedLine, who was the first African-American, I'm going to say the title right, but it was like the world bull riding champion, which was pretty awesome. And he was an amazing human to meet. So that is in the main exhibition space. And then typically in the spring, we'll have our major fundraising gala. And alongside that gala will be an art sale that features resident artist work from the last 12 years. And so we have what's called the curated art sale going on right now as well. All of these will also, the Faces in the Crowd exhibit is actually available online to view. And the curated art sale is actually going up this week. It's only the patio succulent sale that you really have to come to RedLine to see, to purchase. And again, that part of the sales format for the curated art sale and the succulent sale, which is called Hypertufa, is to help bring artist support during this time. So that they can sell their work. RedLine doesn't take a percentage. If artists want to donate a percentage back, that's great, but we're not a gallery. We're definitely, we just want to provide a vehicle for support to artists.
You're all about the art and the artist.
Little bit of a fan, little bit.
And so throughout for the rest of the year, what does that look like as far as exhibits? I know that you have other stuff scheduled on your website, and obviously we're all waiting to see how this all shakes out. But what other exhibits are on the horizon for RedLine in the coming months?
Yeah, so each year we establish a theme that is in relationship to the exhibition proposals that we've been receiving, and this year it was Afrofuturism, and so our summit coming up in August was it was supposed to be a 3-day summit, but is now a virtual summit that's August 7th and 8th. So that is still going forward, but it will be a virtual summit. We have a keynote speaker, Ingrid Lafleur, who will be part of that, as well as a local, he's a comic book art illustrator that particularly focuses on Afrofuturism, named Alan Brooks. So that is going forward. We basically just decided to make Afrofuturism 2 years. And so we have not canceled any of the exhibition. We've just postponed them. So we'll be doing a major Floyd Tunson survey, and that will be in the summer of next year. We had a show scheduled this fall called Africanity in Space and Time, which was led by one of our former resident artists, Dr. Ella Maria Ray, who's an anthropologist, artist, ceramic artist in particular, that looks at the work of Octavia Butler. Her exhibition is being moved to next year. So, what I have wanted to do is not cancel anything, but we're just going to kind of extend out the exhibitions until we can kind of restart the schedule again. And we have tried to also, pay out those contracts that were in the works. So artists are still receiving the support for the exhibitions that were promised. It just, the exhibitions themselves will come later.
Gotcha. That's great. That's awesome. And as a nonprofit, this thing probably, you probably get a fair amount of people that volunteer. And is there a way that people can get involved with RedLine?
Yeah, absolutely. We have an amazing volunteer manager named Jamila Rishardi. You've also probably heard her if you listen to Kuvo, because she's also does a program every other Sunday on Kuvo. But she is the great first contact for our volunteer program. And, we recruit a lot of volunteers for the Anti-Racist Club event that we just held. We always are recruiting volunteers to help us with installations when we're outside of COVID-19, also for artist studio assistants, and so there, and the Reach Studio program. So yes, you can learn about how to volunteer through our website, of course, and reaching out to Jamila. There's, I think, a form online that you can fill out based on your interests, and then she does kind of the matchmaking on the back end with the staff and programs.
And what's your website address?
It's redlineart.org.
And you also have a Facebook page as well, right?
That's right. It's Redline Denver. That's correct. And try to tell everyone who says Redline Gallery that it's not a gallery. It's my main branding issue over the last decade, is that people always call us a gallery, and I should probably just get over it. But it kills a little bit of me each time I hear it.
Do you use Twitter or Instagram?
We do have Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, I think both are just Redline Denver.
Okay, great.
Yep.
We'll make sure that we have all that information for our listeners on the episode notes. Anything else that you want to mention or talk about before we sign off for the evening?
No, I just really appreciate the time you gave to the organization and all the nice things, the reinforcing attitude that I will take with me as I go into this lovely evening. So no, I just really appreciate the invitation and the time and the opportunity to share a little bit more deeply about what RedLine does.
Well, we really appreciated the conversation and your time. And as we say with many artists on the Zoom, we hope that we can follow up with you live and in person. So hopefully we can do that in the future.
For sure. And if you ever want any recommendations of other folks that you could interview based on artists or community members that are doing fantastic things, please don't hesitate. I would be happy to connect.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take you up on that.
Yeah, for sure. And share our podcast.
And I'm so excited. We have like 2%
All
left.
right.
So
perfect timing.
Yeah.
Louise, thank you so much again for coming on.
You.
And I really, truly, I know you're really busy, and I was just so happy to get you to come on the podcast and talk about RedLine and what you do and the work that it does in the community. So thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do. And for the Tenant Podcast, this is Todd Pearson.
And this is Wes Brown. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.